Be bold. Be heard. Welcome to Unmute Your Mic with your host, Jessica Bell. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Unmute Your Mic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. My name is Jessica Bell. I am your host from Kansas City, Missouri. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome to Unmute Your Mic. If you have been here before, thank you for being a part of the Unmute Your Mic family. And as always, before we get started, please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere that you can find a podcast. I'm so excited for our conversations today. Tasha, thank you for agreeing to be on my podcast again. Tasha's from Maryland, and I really know that she is going to speak to many of us who are listening, who maybe have gone through things. So I'm excited for her story. Tasha, thank you. If you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you so much for extending the invitation. I'm just really excited. Whenever I have a chance to share my experience to help somebody else, I just always love to be open because, I wish somebody would have told me, right, a few things and maybe I could address them differently. But I am from Maryland, born and raised around the clock. I'm a mental health professional and also an author and a speaker. So I wear a lot of hats, but ultimately I think my favorite position or favorite identity is just being me. I'm just showing up authentically who I am, who I'm created to be, and really just allow, the evidence of what I do be exuded from my personality and things like that. So I'm just excited to be able to share.
Well, thank you so much. And you're right. You do wear a lot of hats. And so let's just get started. Let's talk about a little bit about what you just mentioned in your intro about you wish there were some things that you would have known. Can you just dive a little bit deeper into that?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a small knit community where, you go somewhere, everyone knows who your parents are, who your family is, that kind of thing. There was no such thing as hiding, right? But because of that close knit community, I was very trusting. I was very open, very accepting. And I thought that everyone walked around with a heart like mine. And so I learned quickly in college as a freshman, that wasn't the case. And so unfortunately, I was sexually assaulted by someone who was considered an acquaintance. We had, mutual friends and things like that. So never once in a million years would I have thought that something like that would happen to me. I just thought that, I played it safe and, just why would anyone even feel entitled to do that? Right. And so that situation really rocked me to the core. Like from that moment on, there was a downward spiral of me questioning my worth, my identity, my purpose, my existence, quite honestly. I really had a very bad view of self. I didn't love myself anymore. And I ultimately forgot who I was before that incident happened. So yeah, I think for me, really learning how to navigate, life, like when you are encountered with something traumatic, really knowing that there was a space for me to find comfort in, to be heard, that would have been helpful. And knowing that I wasn't alone in that process would have been also helpful for me as well.
And I love that you said learning how to navigate like trauma or hard experiences, because I think for a lot of us, if we haven't experienced something, then when it happens, we're just kind of out here like, what do we do? Who do we turn to? And so what were some of the things that you had to do, in that initial process? Because obviously there's shock. But after that, like, how did you say, okay, like I've got to pick myself up and keep going?
For me, after walking around with like the shame and the guilt and embarrassment, it just became really heavy, that I felt so weighed down, that it was just really hard to get up out of the bed. It was really hard to even face myself. That after a while, I had to come to the understanding that this has happened to me, but it doesn't define who I am. And so I had to really remember who I was. Like, who were you before this happened? What about all of the life that people have spoken into you before this happened? What about those things? And really reclaiming my power. I think that was most important, because even though the incident has happened, it's kind of like I'm still allowing this person to be in control of my life. I'm still allowing this person to taunt me. So I'm now limiting myself, and then I'm limiting my potential. And it's like, why give someone the authority and power to control me when they didn't have control in the first place? So that was my start. That was my breaking point to say, okay, I need to get myself together.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, because sometimes we're fearful to like forgive people because we think that means we're letting them off the hook. Like, how dare I forgive you because you did this horrible thing to me, when it's really not about them at all. It's about us being able to freely walk into who we're supposed to be and not have like this ball and chain attached to us, especially when it was something that we couldn't even control. And so what are some of the things that you as you were moving forward and like you were healing, what were some of the things you kind of did to maybe tell or let other people know, who maybe have gone through trauma, like how they could navigate through similar situations or just trauma in general?
So for me, I had to ultimately acknowledge how I felt. I think, when you continue to ignore it, or you continue to dismiss it, or just act like it didn't exist, it's not healthy to just keep it all bottled in. So acknowledging how I felt, and that it was a real thing, and that it was okay to feel a certain way. And then after acknowledging that, thinking about, what am I going to do to address my feelings? It's kind of like, it made me think about, as a child, you hurt yourself, you scrape your knee. Okay, so you're acknowledging the fact that you fell and you hurt yourself, but then now you're addressing it by putting a Band-Aid on it, right? Or putting the disinfectant or whatever it is for it to heal properly. And so it's like, for me, doing the intentional inner work was important. And so knowing that, okay, when this happened, I felt like this, I felt worthless, I felt like damaged goods. So how can I address those thoughts and those feelings into something positive? And so for me, words of affirmation was major. It was critical. And I was just really thinking about who I am to everyone else. Like when I think of my family, right, knowing that they love me for me, that I don't have to perform, or I don't have to behave a certain way, that their love for me is not going to change. And so thinking about those things, thinking about how I felt about myself before this happened. And so reminding myself that, just because this happened, it doesn't mean that who I am or my value has diminished because of it. And so being a woman of faith, a woman of God, I go back to my Bible and I'm like, what does God say about me ultimately? Because he knew what was going to happen to me before I did, but he understood that there was a greater purpose in that. And so trying to figure out the lesson or what I needed to learn from this, even in the hurt, even in the turmoil, even in the confusion, to really figure out, what is the greater impact beyond myself? Why did I have to go through this to learn what was most important? And for me, it was really ultimately about rediscovering who I am and my purpose. And so really understanding that even though this wasn't a situation that I never saw happen, but because of it, I now created an outlet, becoming a lighthouse for other people. And so really looking at that, and then, having trusted friends, my circle, my tribe, to just hold me accountable, even when days I feel so defeated, that they're there to empower me and to remind me and affirm me of who I am. And journaling was my safe haven. Like for me, I had to find a release, and that was the start of it, to really write down my thoughts and to really figure out why I feel this way and what can I do with them. And so it's just all about, understanding where you are, giving yourself the grace and where you are, but then knowing how to activate beyond that.
That's good. And then I know that you mentioned that you are an author. So could you talk a little bit about the book or books that you have and kind of your inspiration behind those?
Yeah, so that's another thing that came out of this experience, like never in a million years would I thought that I'd be an author. I've always been, I'm a very private person, extremely introverted. And so to now put myself out there, in the hands of people who don't know me, who may never meet me, it was a huge risk, but it was a risk that I was willing to take because the whole point of having a story is to share it, and no one can tell your story better than you can. And so for me, that's how I really got into writing. And so my first two books, they're a part of a series of Who Am I? And the first one is Who Am I When Everything is Silent? And it really talks about the thoughts and ideas that you experience from day to day. You don't really know what to do with them. And so really showcasing that in a healthy way. And then the second one is Who Am I When I'm Under the Limelight? And it really talks about how people can have this level of perception of who you are, but it's from a restricted lens. And so until you really get to know me, then you won't really know the core of who I am. And so really talking about dealing with those pressures and things like that. And then the most recent one, that's the one I consider my baby. And it really talks about my personal testament, my personal experiences of overcoming. And that is called Recognize Your Opponent When Your Greatest Enemy is Your Inner Me. And it really talks about me unpacking the negative thoughts that I've had, unpacking self-sabotage, unpacking the fact that I thought that I had to accept the bare minimum. And so in that book, it really talks about the boxes that I subconsciously place myself in, the boxes that others place me in, and the boxes that society placed me in, and what I did to break down those stereotypes. And also it includes writing prompts for people, like if it's a reflection or say, you just want to do something to really jumpstart and shift your mindset. That's what it really is there for. And then it also includes like tips and tools that you can take with you, because I'm just a person that if I'm going to share knowledge, I'm going to make sure that it's applicable. And so that's what I do ultimately. And I'm just really excited because out of all of those books, that is the one that has been the bestseller. It's on the campus of Johnson C. Smith University. So knowing it's in the hands of other people who want to learn about who I am, the girl in the box is what they call me. And then knowing that book speaks life into them just lets me know that I've accomplished the purpose that I was supposed to do in writing that one.
And that's a huge blessing. And when you were describing that book, I want that. Because there's so many, I've had so many conversations with people about feeling boxed in or feeling like they're defined by only one little part of themselves, or the world says you should do this, this, and this. And so you feel like you're behind because you're not on somebody else's timeline. I could just go for hours about that topic, but I love that you, like you said, you have that in the hands of people already. And I think so many more people need to, learn about that and learn that you don't have to put yourself in the box. You don't have to accept the boxes that other people put you in. And so I don't want you to tell the book, but can you give us a sneak peek about how you even started to unpack that? Because that's some serious inner work that you have to do.
Yeah. So ultimately I took it back to childhood, really get into the root of a lot of things that I've allowed to perpetuate into becoming an adult. And, some of the things that I mentioned, the first time I've been introduced to the beauty scale, right? Whole life growing up, your parents, they're telling you you're beautiful and, but you don't really understand that there's a whole measurement of what beauty may look like. And so you're placed in situations where someone may make you feel inadequate because of what you look like. And so I talk about that. I talk about how subconsciously I kind of placed them back on the shelf until they resurfaced again when it came to dead end relationships, right? And then I look at generational decisions is what I call them instead of generational curses, but generational decisions, and how a lot of what had taken place before me directly impacted me. And then it correlated to a lot of the decisions that I made, and I didn't understand why I was making them. And so really addressing those things head on. And, I think sometimes there has to be that person that says, you know what, I'm going to switch the narrative. I'm going to make things look a little different. And so really unpacking those deep-seated, deep-rooted issues. Like a lot of things come to light. And I just feel that when you are so open and when you're authentic and when you're vulnerable, like healing really takes place, and so does freedom. And so it was just things that I could not, hide anymore or keep silent. I just had to reveal. So that way people knew that they weren't alone, or people knew that they're not the only ones dealing with certain family members. You're not by yourself. And knowing that even if what you're experiencing is so complex and so, unique, it doesn't mean that it's chaotic. It doesn't mean that it's disorderly. It just means that you have to combat that issue from a different approach that you would least expect. And so the whole point is, to find beauty and to find blessing in the brokenness. So to you, you may think that, okay, this is a dead situation. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can get out of it. But the book tells you otherwise, that if you really view it from a different perspective, and then you really implement it from an innovative way, you can be the one to change the direction or the course of where things were once headed.
That's beautiful. You said so much good stuff. I love that you call it generational decisions and not curses. But I mean, they both apply, but I've never heard that term. So I love that because I think a lot of us are in survival mode. And it's because our parents were in survival mode and our grandparents. And so we're just kind of doing things just to do them. We don't know why we're doing certain things. It's something that's been handed down, and we just kind of are keeping the tradition. And so I'm all about, being able to expose some of those things and say, hey, like, just because it was done like this for the last 50 years doesn't mean that you have to operate like this. Your children have to operate like this. So I love that. And so I love that that you also said, you are a woman of faith. And so that made me want to ask this question because I'm a minister as well. And people ask me this a lot, and they say, like, so how did you keep your relationship with God when these hard things were happening? Because some people will turn and look at God and be like, how dare you let this thing happen to me? And so what was kind of your perspective when you had gone through hard things, when you were uprooting these things that happened in your life? How did you keep your faith?
Oh, man. Definitely not easy. That's for sure. It's so tempting to do what's familiar, and that's usually trying to run away from something that appears to be challenging. But one thing that I had to remind myself, that when I said yes to God, I was saying no to everything else that was once comfortable. And so, for me, maintaining that and sustaining that is ultimately, okay, ooh, I'm now afflicted with this. Okay, which scripture applies to this? Okay, why do I keep going through this same cycle? There's something that I'm not grasping. There's something that I'm still trying to do. There's something that I'm still getting in the way of. What is it? And so for me, it was ultimately surrendering. Even if I'm still going through the same lesson over and over, clearly, for me, it was my lack of patience initially. It's like, okay, I feel like it's taking too long, or I feel like I got the lesson already. Why, that kind of thing. And it's just kind of like, no, you don't. Humble yourself real quick. You don't have it. This is why you're going through this again, right? You up here picking up stuff after I've done a little bit, and you think that's enough, but I'm trying to give you more, but I need to make sure that I can trust you with what I just presented to you. So it's like, okay, get me all the way together. And so it's just really like, okay, do your actions align with what you're saying? If you say that you trust me, show me. If you say that you trust me, how are you presenting that on a daily basis? Do you only trust me because it feels good and you know what the expected end is going to be? Or are you trusting me no matter what it looks like? And so it's just really ultimately remembering the purpose and intent of the process and knowing that the process is ongoing, I think for me is what helps me remain grounded. But then it also reminds me that I can't do any of this on my own. It just reminds me that I'm flawed, but yet still worthy and still the apple of his eye. And so at the end of the day, if I'm going through something, I'm not going through it alone.
That's beautiful and so true. And something that we always have to remember, because there are times when we can feel really alone, especially in our darkest moments. And that even if we are alone, we don't, even if we're physically alone, we're not truly alone. And I love that, because I think more people need to kind of keep that in the back of our head when we're truly struggling with something. And so I wanted to know if you could take a couple of minutes to speak to somebody who is listening that maybe is just struggling. They're struggling with self-worth. They're struggling with confidence, or there's a dream that God has placed inside of them that they feel too boxed in to complete. Could you speak to them and just inspire them?
All right. So to everyone's listening, please listen and hear me loud and clear. That dream that you're sitting on and you feel like you're inadequate or inefficient, God didn't give you the dream for nothing. There's a reason why he keeps showing you. There's a reason why he's going to continue to show you until you act upon it. So he's giving you the dream. So that means he's also going to give you the tools and resources to fulfill it. So trust him. For those who are struggling with self-worth, self-love, go back to the core of who you are. Know that your identity is grounded in God first and foremost, and that you don't need to compare yourself to anyone else. You don't have to feel like you have to live up to the standards of what society is telling you, because you are enough. Know that your life has purpose. Your voice has value. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and God does not make any mistakes. You are masterfully crafted. You are his beautiful masterpiece. So own it. Embrace your greatness. The things that you feel are flawed, the things that you feel like you just don't enjoy or like about yourself, those are the very things that he's going to use for you to fulfill your purpose here in the earth.
That's beautiful. And I did want to ask you too. I know that people who work in the mental health field, or people who have gone through certain things, when they start pouring out to others, you have to also make sure that you stay filled. So what are some of the things that you do to make sure that your mental health stays good and that you don't carry the weight of other people?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because sometimes people think that as a mental health professional, you're just always in that mode, like all day long. It's not true. It's not true. They kind of forget the humanistic side of us in this profession. But for me, boundaries are so important. And that's just, the internal boundary of making sure that I don't take on things from work into my home and vice versa, because my home is my safe space. It's my sacred ground. So I don't want to take on things that don't belong here. Also boundaries with people, making sure that, the clients and stuff that I work with, that boundary is just that, not giving too much, not telling too much, not oversharing, but really understanding my assignment when working with them. Also, for me, I am very intentional with incorporating self-care in my day. And that's just usually for me, just sitting still, being quiet, releasing all of the tabs in my head, and just kind of recentering myself. Because I think it's so important that I have to have a moment where I am recharged, because if I'm continually trying to operate off fumes, I'm no service to anyone, and definitely not myself. And so just like I make sure that I incorporate, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I make sure that I'm incorporating my self-care that same way. I also have, moments where I'm connecting with family. FaceTime is our thing, especially with the climate of the world right now. So not being able to see them in person as often as I would like. So that also helps. My family really gives me that recharge also that I need. and just really listening to some really good music, that can just brighten my day and just kind of put me in a really good place is also some things that I do for self-care.
Those are all good. And I think more people need to practice self-care in a daily sense and not just like a once a month, like, oh, I'm going to go get my nails done or go get my hair done, but just like incorporating things into the day so that it doesn't get to the point where you're just like filled to the top, can't take another thing, ready to lose your mind, because I know that we all have those days. And so I love that you said you do stuff on a daily basis that just kind of keep you balanced, because it's very easy to carry the weight of the world. And especially in your field, like you said, people expect you to just be on, like this is what you're supposed to do, so just help me. And it's like you're not really allowed to have a bad day or have your life. And so I love that. And I love that you keep your faith in the center of everything, because I think that truly is the most important thing. Because without that, you can't really be grounded and you'll kind of just go wherever the wind takes you, which is no fun. And many of us who maybe have had those moments know what that feels like. And so how do you think that you stay grounded in your word? Like, so obviously people say, I read the Bible or I go to church, and those are all great things. But is there anything else that you do to make sure that God stays at the forefront of everything?
Absolutely. So on my desk, you know how sometimes you kind of get like those like flip calendars or whatever that you're going to put on there. So for me, I have a flip calendar for every day, 365. So one side will be a scripture, then the other side would be like a positive quote. And so that is like subtle reminders that I need. And then I also have little index cards where I have like some of my favorite scriptures on there, just to kind of be in the forefront, to kind of remind me, like, say if there's a level of frustration that could be going on, or if things just aren't working out the way I think they should, it's just a reminder, don't act like this. You can't respond this way, that kind of thing. And so really understanding that what I'm doing ultimately is pleasing to him. That keeps me grounded. It's like I'm not trying to please anyone else. I have to be the best me that I can be. And the only way I can do that is if I allow his light to shine through me. And so if I'm sitting around here with the bad attitude, is that really a good reflection of God? No. If I feel like I want to respond to someone because of the way that they reacted towards me, not a good reflection. So always just remembering that I'm the light, that I allow my light to overshadow the darkness and not the other way around.
I love it. I love it. That's so good, because sometimes we need that little check to act right, because we know that as believers, people are watching us. And even if they don't ever tell us, they're watching how we move. They're watching how we act in hard or difficult situations, because we are, I know it's cliche, but we are the only Bible some people will ever read or will ever see. And so it is so important that we kind of keep that in our mind so that we can remember to be the light, because there are going to be some times when people will turn to you and be like, I need prayer, I need something. And you won't even know that they were a believer, that they were watching you, but they watch how you handle yourself. And there's definitely something on you that is beautiful. I can tell you just have, this poise and grace about you. So I thank you so much for telling your story. And can you let everybody know how they can find you, where they can purchase your book, that kind of thing?
Yes. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Like, I'm truly, truly grateful. So if you are someone who loves social media, you can follow me on Instagram. I am at Life with Tasha W _. And then Facebook, Tasha W. You can find me on there. I have a Facebook group. If you want to be a part of my community, hey, all you want to see is inspiration. I'm just telling you right now. And positivity. So, for that, hey, check my group out. I also have a website, www.tashaw.net. You can also purchase my book on there, or you can also purchase it on Amazon. And so just a great way to kind of keep up with the things that I do and, who I'm around, all the kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a great way to keep in contact with me.
And then I'm going to put all of her information down below. So if you are watching this live on Facebook, all her information is going to be below, as well as on YouTube. If you're checking us out, just audio on my website or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it will all be in the show notes. Please stay connected with her. Please support her. Tasha, thank you so much for sharing a little piece of your story and for being such an inspiration for everybody, for me, for people who are listening. I thank you so much again. It has been a true honor to have you on my show. And don't forget to be bold, be heard, and unmute your mic. Like I said, you can find us at unmuteyourmic.org. Thank you, Tasha.
Thank you for tuning in to Unmute Your Mic. Be sure to tune in next time when Jessica takes her mic off mute as she continues her journey to find stories that inspire and uplift our communities.